Lee Cox. Thanks for tuning in, Lee. There's Sal. I'm going. He's connecting. There he is.
All
Sal,
right.
how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How you holding up so far?
So far, I think really missing golf. Especially as soon as it gets nice out, I'm like, I wish I could be out there, but can't. Other than that, everybody's healthy, and but we're in the New York area, so stuff's getting a little crazy over here.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, we're doing okay. We're in the South Carolina Low Country. Not many cases here for sure. The hotels are shutting down, and so they're trying to limit or at least discourage tourists traveling in from outside. And so we're going to be okay.
Yeah, it's, we've been on, I guess we went to work from home 2.5 weeks ago. So it was a little bit of an adjustment for me, but we have a lot of people who actually do work from home. So I actually learned from them on what to do. And one of the things I do to get my day started is actually leave the apartment, take a little walk and come back in with social distancing, of course. But that kind of helps me set up the day.
Good. Well, Sal, I know a lot of people are tuning in, and they've most likely never seen your face. They most likely don't know who you are. And so if you could give us just a little rundown as to who you are and what your company is all about. I'm very excited to be affiliated with Arccos, simply because of what I can learn and what I can steal for not only my own game but my students' games. And so give us a little rundown, if you would, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sal Syed. I'm CEO and co-founder of Arccos Golf. My background is really in technology. So after college, I grew up in Pakistan. I actually grew up golfing in Pakistan, but
very cool.
Played more cricket and tennis than golf at the time. And my dad introduced me to the game. And I remember the first time I was basically forced into the game because my dad got me a set of clubs and he was like, you got to try this. And from the outside looking in as a 12-year-old, I was like, golf seems really slow. You're walking and I'm here running, playing tennis and cricket and whatnot. But I remember the first time I played on the third hole, I hit a 5-iron pure, and then I was like, wow, this game is amazing. I love it. And so since then I've been hooked, and I played college tennis, but I would say golf always remained my first love after I got into the game. And then I came to America for college, went to a small liberal arts college in Ohio, was the captain of the tennis team over there, and then worked in technology. After I was a data architect, so always involved in the data side of technology. And then I went to business school at Yale. Part of the reason I went there was I loved the golf course. And I figured if I'm going to take 2 years off from working, it better be someplace where I can golf and golf well. And so that was awesome, just being at Yale. And over there, the reason I went to business school was I wanted to start something. And I discovered that, there's a lot of self-reflection in business school, which I didn't really expect that. And so I discovered that for me, if I did something I'm passionate about, I do a much better job and I enjoy life a lot more, and it never feels like work. And so that's how I wanted to, for life to be for me. And so I ended up basically merging, I would say, some of my passions, which are golf, technology, and data. And that's where kind of Arccos started, but we did get a lot of support from the industry up front as well.
And so what is for people who maybe have heard the name Arccos, can you tell us what it's about? What does it do?
Sure. So the name is actually a mathematical term. It's the inverse of the cosine function. It's a tribute to some of the engineering. So it's some of the secret sauce within the code. So we wanted to bring it out as a tribute to the engineering. And what it does is, if you guys have heard of ShotLink, which is a system to track data for PGA Tour players, and it's only for PGA Tour players, and it's 300 volunteers a day recording the geolocation, GPS coordinates of every shot you're taking. And so it's ShotLink for the amateur golfer. And the way it works is you get a set of 14 sensors. You can buy your sensors on Amazon and Apple stores globally. Right now, obviously, everything's shut down. Or if you buy a set of Cobra or Ping, as you have Ping irons, the sensors come with them. And then there's a one-time paying process with your smartphone. And what we do after that is when you get to a course, you just start the round in the app, and you put the phone in your pocket. And then every time you take a shot, you don't have to worry about practice shots or any of that stuff. Every time you take a shot, we record the location of where you hit that shot. And we figure out where your shot ended up because that's where you take your next shot from. So what we're doing is dropping pins. Imagine dropping pins everywhere you take a golf shot. And we're capturing data around what club was used, what terrain was it? Was it a tee shot that ended up in the right rough or the right bunker? Was it an approach shot that ended up on the green, or did you miss the green by 30 yards to the right? Whatever the outcomes are, we're literally recording everything. And then we take that data and give you insights. We give you insights. Some of them include the basic, which is how far your clubs actually go. And it sounds basic, but honestly, most people don't know that.
I like that you threw the word actually in there. So.
And then we break your game down via strokes gain into what your strengths and weaknesses are. With Microsoft, we've partnered to build an AI caddy that gives you like the optimal strategic choices off the tee and off every shot. So it's taking ego out of the equation and putting data in so that you just have better performance. In fact, our average user improves 4.2 shots in their first season with Arccos, which, I mean, that's how we measure ourselves. Are we delivering to our promise? And that's how we look internally.
And Sal, I must say, I was apprehensive of what Arccos stood for and what Arccos was all about. Of course, I didn't know at the time. And all the really smart people that I know at Ping kept saying, Andrew, you should check it out. You should check it out. And I started to go, well, they're smarter than you are, Andrew. They might know something you don't know. And so you need to look a little further. And so I was talking to some of the people with your company, and it really, I've played 11 rounds with my Arccos system
awesome.
now. And it really has opened my eyes to, as a golfer, speaking as a golfer here, to what I need to improve upon. It's amazing to me because I've got TrackMan, and so I know how far I actually carry each of my clubs. And after 11 rounds, and obviously you've got shots on cold days, you've got shots on warm days, you've got uphill, you've got downhill, you've got well hit, you've got poorly hit. And Arccos gives you total distances, but it's amazing how even after 11 rounds of golf, I'm starting to see that my total distances are starting to fit almost exactly where I would think my carry numbers are. So if I carry a 7-iron, for example, 160 yards, my total distance on a 7-iron is right around 168. And so once you flush all of the outliers out and you start to pile up enough shots, it's almost as if once you get about 20 shots per club, you start to get pretty representative data pertaining to distance.
There's no doubt about that. And you're 100% right. Actually, I mean, it's amazing the work that Ping engineers have done on this data too. We learn a lot from them as well. And you're right. I mean, the thing with GPS technology is it's gotten really accurate, and it's going to get more and more accurate. And like I remember like one of the early times when we were doing a demo with one of the OEMs, they had lasers out there to measure distances, and they're putting it in Excel, and everything was coming out. I mean, it's an impressive thing, the GPS technology. And I'm personally fascinated with technology, so I started looking up like the history of the GPS. And I mean, little geek fact, I don't know if your listeners are interested or not, but without Einstein, GPS wouldn't be around. GPS satellites actually apply the theory of relativity to make it all possible, which I thought was fascinating. So we can now tie Arccos' existence to Einstein. Like if Einstein weren't there, Arccos wouldn't be around, which is kind of funny.
That is neat. That is neat. It has, I must say, my package of data, and anyone who's watching, I wrote a pretty in-depth article on my experience and my data and what my findings have been. If you go to my website, andrewricegolf.com, it's one of the most recent articles that I've written, and I would encourage everybody to do that and go and learn about it. But Sal, you've got, I don't want this to be a big sales pitch for Arccos, and we're certainly not going to go there. The technology is cool. I think golfers will save strokes doing it. It's almost a case of, if someone said, give me the simplest thing, Andrew, they came to me as a golfer and said, give me the simplest thing you can tell me to do to go and cut strokes from my game, I'd say, get Arccos, use it every day. Because I know for myself, a couple of things I've picked up. I need to increase my club speed. I hit the ball too short. Hitting it further would start to save some strokes gained off the tee for me, and I need to work on my chipping. And so it tells me as a golfer where I'm strong and where I'm weak. I must say, I would have said prior to using Arccos that I would be strong when it comes to chipping. I would be a good chipper. And it has shown that I'm not necessarily a good chipper, particularly when the lies are tight. Most of the rounds I've played have been in Australia. And so it really opens a player's eyes as to how they need to practice. But as far as the coach side of things go, I have the ability to follow my students that use Arccos. And so I can look deeper into their rounds and start to get an understanding as to where they're doing well and where they're doing poorly. And so I can start to temper my lessons to fit their needs.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. It's a great thing. Okay, Sal, so here's what I'd like from you. You've got this giant mountain of data. If you think the ShotLink data for the PGA Tour is huge, you've got way more of that in way less time, simply because you've got more golfers, and golfers are playing every day. They're also hitting more shots than those guys do.
That is true.
And so what have been, and I really do want this to be something that coaches and golfers can both gain from, what have been, let's say, 3 big insights that you've found when sifting through the data? What do you see that that you feel can help us?
It's a great question. I think maybe I'll share some overarching insights, but before I share them, I will say the insights vary golfer to golfer, because as an instructor, as you'll know, every golfer is different. And so you might have 2 12 handicap golfers who both want to say be an 8 by the end of the season, and they would have totally different roadmaps for improvement. One person might be struggling with chipping. Another one might be struggling with driving. And so, and as an example, actually, I just did a podcast with Golf Science Labs, and I was talking about user improvement and how people are improving and stories and things like that. And one of our users reached out to me, and he was like, I'm really disappointed. I've been using Arccos for 2 years, and I haven't really seen that improvement. Maybe could you look at my data and see what you find? Maybe I'm not looking at it correctly. And I couldn't help myself but look at his data because so this Saturday, that's what I did. And then we applied so I got one of our engineers involved. So we're building this new strokes gain algorithm, which helps you really, it's based on the 200 million shots that we have. It's neural net based, so you can really set target handicaps. So we're going to launch this in Q2 of this year. But what we found in his data was a couple of things, but one thing was really, really fascinating, and this is something we haven't launched yet, was he was losing way more shots on straight par 4s than he was on dogleg left or dogleg right. So his performance, he was literally losing 0.2 shots extra on the drive, or 0.18 shots extra on each drive that he hit on a straight par 4 versus dogleg left or dogleg right, and same length, same everything. So that was fascinating. I looked at it, I never, when we were looking at stuff, but I hadn't come across something like that. And so I just made him aware. I was like, one, he needed to work more on, he had too many penalties off the tee compared to where he needs to be. So on certain shorter par 4s, maybe he was being too aggressive with driver where he didn't need to be, where he's bringing more penalties and playing bigger stroke loss. But on straight holes, he's losing strokes. And I was like, maybe you should treat every straight hole as a dog leg. Mentally, if you trick your mind, maybe that works. I don't know. but he's got that information. He's going to take it to his coach, and they're going to figure out a strategy. But that was fascinating. But my point serves to illustrate that every golfer is different. However, I think if I were to find patterns, there certainly is. There are some. One is a cognitive bias of overestimating your ability, and that exists not just. I would say like generally the golfing demographic is a successful demographic, and when I went to business school, one of the experiments the professor conducted on us was they asked the students, are you above or below average compared to your classmates? And 95% of my business school classmates said, we're all above average, which mathematically is not possible. So that bias, they wanted to show us that, we have this internal bias that we're overconfident. So you need to be aware of that. And I think what Arccos does is helps you realize, your 8-iron might not go 150. It might go 150 when you hit it perfect, but you might only hit it perfect 10% of the time. So you need to plan for not perfect. You need to plan for the average outcome. That's when you're going to score the best. So I think that bias exists when we share. Like you can see the club selection changes as people start realizing, oh my goodness, like data right here shows me 8-iron's going 139, not 150. And so our users hit their approach shots 14.9 feet closer to the hole after 5 rounds with Arccos. I think that's a big one, the ability to overcome that bias. Initially, it's an ego hit, but then their performances end up being better. In fact, it's a funny story. Our board member might kill me, but I have to share this. So one of our board members who's been a mentor and advisor to me for a long time, Woody, just recently got his first hole-in-one with Arccos. And he doesn't, so his weakness is his driving distance is he's about a 12 to a 13 handicap. And his biggest weakness is driving, does not hit it far enough. And so on a par 3, without Arccos, he would have never done this. But on a par 3, it was into the wind, out at the Cape, windy. So he had about 197 yards, I think, to the flag, but was playing like 225, which is what his driver goes. Yeah. And so he pulled out a driver. Other people are making fun of him. Oh, you're going to hit driver on this par 3, blah, blah.
I know guys hate to hit driver on a par 3. They hate it.
Yeah, and he hits it and it goes in the hole. And now nobody's making fun of him. But you had to overcome ego to say, like, cool. That's the club to hit, which is fascinating. It's like a human psychology challenge. That's what golf is. And we maybe help you with that.
It's amazing, Sal. I get to teach the golfers the type of golfers that use Arccos, and it's incredible how many golfers that come to my 3-day golf schools. How far do you hit a 7-iron? 165, and I hit a 7-iron 160 yards carry, and they're swinging 10 miles an hour slower than me. So I know their number is not even close.
So you're already aware of that, yeah.
Yeah, they leave the school with a more accurate number. It might not feel as good. You can't tell your buddies, 7-iron 165. It's more like 145. Yeah. But they actually start to play better golf.
Exactly.
And that's really the whole objective here. I had one older player once, a very good golfer, played on the Walker Cup many years ago. And he was hitting on TrackMan on the range with me, taking a lesson, and he hit 5 shots, and I said, how far do you typically hit this club in your hand? And he said, carry. I said, yeah. He said 158, and 4 out of the 5 shots he had hit had carried 158 point something. And that just speaks to me along the lines of the better the player, the more accurate their numbers are. And if you want to get better, and we all do, there's a lot of golfers watching this because they want to get better. Let's know our numbers. Let's know the data, data-driven decision making instead of ego and emotion-driven.
Totally. And then I would say, in addition to that, one other interesting, I honestly, I would say I consider myself a student learning from others how people are utilizing data, how people like you, and I learned from Ping. So John K. Solheim, who's their president, was playing with Arccos. He's an avid user, and he's actually dropped from a 7 or 8 to went down to a 0. Now he's a 1, purely based on Arccos data and fitting. So what was interesting was when I was playing with him, a couple of insights that he had. One was he didn't realize how bad his chipping was compared to the rest of his game. So the rest of his game was basically operating at a scratch level, but he was chipping like a 25 handicap. And so he started taking chipping lessons and really improved and saw dramatic improvement in his performance, which, I mean, I'll get to that other point you asked, like, what are some big takeaways? Another one is people truly don't know their strengths and weaknesses. Where are you actually losing strokes on the golf course? And it's very hard. You're taking 80, say 70 to 90 to 100 shots around. We're not, our brain isn't designed to remember all of that. Our brain is designed to remember the highlight moments, like the best shots and the worst shots. The rest get put away where it's hard for us to access it. Just like any drive you take to work, which right now we're not taking, nobody's driving to work. But when you do, if it's a normal day, 5 days later, you're not going to be able to recall what happened on that drive. Did you even drive to work that day? It's like tough to remember because that's how the brain works. So similarly, when you play a round of golf, for you to objectively analyze where are you actually losing strokes, you need a system to do that for you. And so when we're able to do that, it helps you understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. In John case, it was chipping. It motivates you because then your target pinpointed in terms of this is what I got to improve and I'm going to get better faster. And then what was really fascinating to me was he said to me, he's like, my irons, I'm missing 3 times more to the right than I am to the left. And he'd gotten fit. And he has the latest, greatest fitting tools. And he's like, so I was like, yeah, so maybe you should aim a little bit more left. And he's like, no, Sal, I can get the clubs adjusted so it moves the club so I don't have to aim where I shouldn't be aiming. And so he got refit based on his on-course data, which that was new to me. I'd never even heard of such a thing. And so now it's fascinating because we partnered with Club Champion. And the whole idea is that your fitting process should be not just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing, and it should be based on not just your launch monitor data. It should also be based on your on-course data. What are your missed tendencies and all that stuff? So I think that's also really, really fascinating.
That is a great idea, Sal. I love that because all my students, I say to them, hey, listen, if you're going to get fitted with a fitter or you're going to go and get some new clubs, I want to call the fitter so that I can tell them about your shot pattern and what you don't want and what you do want. And if a club fitter had the ability to look at somebody's, even if it was 10 rounds of data from playing, they would certainly be able to go, okay, this player, they don't need more upright because their tendency is always to hit left. And so they need something a little different. They would be able to see what they're trying to avoid and what they're trying to shoot for when it came to that fitting. That is so cool. Yeah,
fascinating. I find it totally fascinating. Like, I'm obsessed with data, and it's like interesting where this data is going to take us as golfers and how much. I think like the key is in the end what we're focused on, and I think what all of us as golfers are focused on is maximizing the value we get out of the game. And anything we can do to do that, I mean, that's like our mission at Arccos, is really helping you get every second worth out of that game. And golf has the potential for that, which is, I love that.
I think one of the greatest joys we can have as golfers is to hit shots that feel good. First and foremost, we all want to hit shots that feel good. I know this. If I have a good day, I can shoot under par. If I have a bad day, I'll shoot in the upper 70s. But if I go out and I shoot mid 70s and I just flush the ball exactly where I'm looking for, that's a great place to start. The second coolest thing for me is to shoot low scores. Is to be efficient, is to be effective. And Arccos is certainly going to help me with that as far as decision making goes, as far as how to practice.
Totally agree. I mean, I think that it's all like the memories that we create on the golf course. And sometimes the memories are those amazing shots. Sometimes it's the amazing rounds. Hopefully it's not the crappy shots and the crappy rounds. And we all want to create those amazing memories. And that's kind of our mission. You're right. And I mean, it's what's really interesting about that is one of the key memories in golf is if you get a hole in one. There's so much. I think so much associated with it, the moment and like the celebration and all that stuff. And so I was curious because I was like, I've gotten 3 holes in one in 5 years. We've had 2 other people in the company get holes in one. We just had our board member. I was like, this frequency seems really high. It was like our team over here is about 30 people. There's like more than I would expect. And actually, I think we might have had another team member get one. So we looked at our data and for like confirmed holes in one and the frequency, and then we compared it to the insurance companies, what the hole in one insurance at country clubs stuff is. And we're at a 5.5x rate for holes in one compared to what you can get insured against. So it's almost like Arccos gets started its own insurance product, shorting the other hole in one insurance companies.
Hey, if you can beat the insurance company, you are doing something special.
Yeah,
that's very cool. Okay, so Sal, you said 2 things that I picked up on. Maybe you said something else, but number one, we're not as good as we think we are. I just want to tell an interesting story there, because in a lot of my presentations, I tell the story about this one friend of mine, an older golfer that I play golf with, and he thinks he hits the ball the same distance he used to hit it when he was, 40 years ago. And so on one particular hole, he had 200 yards of carry over water, and I said, "No, you're laying up." He's like, "No, I didn't come here to lay up as a guy would do." And I eventually forced him to lay up, and he hit a 7-iron short of the water and then wedged it over, hit it to 3 feet, made the putt for birdie, and now he's got this great memory, this special moment, And so Dr. Mark Brody, Strokes Gained, he heard my story, and he said, "Andrew, I ran the numbers for you, and from 200 yards, going for a green over a hazard," he said, "what do you think the percentage of times the player needs to be able to hit the ball over the hazard, not necessarily on the green, over the hazard? What percentage of time do they need to hit it over in order to make it statistically feasible?" And so I thought, wow, it's got to be like, they got to be able to get it over half the amount of time. And the number shocked me because it was 90%.
Wow.
This guy, Randy, in my story, would have had to hit the ball over the water. I know he couldn't hit it over the water 9% of the time. Okay? In his head, he could. But reality, data-driven, he would never be able to get it over there 90% of the time to make it a green light, to make it a go. And there he was getting ready to pull the pin and just,
it's amazing. I'm actually looking at, we have all these benchmark data, so I just pulled up an Excel. And from 200 plus yards out, a scratch golfer only hits the green 12.6% of the time.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy. Like only 200, any shot, but basically looking at all approach shots over 200, only 12% times are you hitting the green. So, yeah. With hazard and everything, that doesn't make sense.
It also,
unless it's your last hole and you need to eagle it to win and nothing else matters.
Go for it. Yeah. Go for it. It's all or nothing. You're either gonna win or you're gonna lose.
Yeah.
If you don't go and if you don't pull it off, you're gonna lose. So give it a go. But too often golfers are going for that shot on the 3rd hole of their day and they hit it in the water. They hate themselves. They have a bad day because of that one shot, and it can ruin their day.
It's totally true. Totally true. And especially early on in the round, it can really. I wonder. We don't have data on this, but what effect your mood and things like that have on your golf performance? Like maybe with Apple Watch data integration, things like that, we might be able to figure that out later and get you in the right mood. But what happens if, I guess what we could do is how correlated are early bad holes to a bad round, which would be fascinating. Like how important is it to start strong or not?
Yeah. So we're not as good as we think we are, number one.
Yeah, we're not as good as we think we are. We also don't know what we should be working on. It's very hard for us to figure it out. So we hear stories over and over again, like, oh, I thought my putting sucked. Turns out it was my approach game. Or I didn't realize how bad I was at chipping. And so like the quantification of not just where you should work on, but how bad are you there is really empowering, because then you are able to pinpoint and improve. So I think we don't know as golfers what are our actual weaknesses. And that was true for even PGA Tour players. when you talk to Claude Harmon, Dustin Johnson didn't like, he would like to hit drivers, right? And turns out he was weak with his wedge play. And so they changed his practice to spend a lot more time with his wedges, and ends up winning the US Open. That was the year they changed it. And so it's not just like us as everyday golfers. Of course, it's very hard for us, but even without the strokes gain data in terms of where are you losing strokes, the practice, even at the highest level, it's impossible to figure out unless somebody's doing it, because you need a couple of things. One, you need to know your performance, and then you need to know the benchmark. Like, how is the average scratch golfer doing? And you don't play with 5,000 scratch golfers to figure out, okay, this is what their average performance is, and humans can't do it. So I think that's key. Those are two big ones, and maybe if there's a third one, it might be. I mean, I don't really. I want to drill a little bit more into this, but I'll share some of the stuff. I think it might be that we're not, as golfers, we're using the driver more often on every hole. Like when you look at the percentage times PGA Tour players use a driver versus the scratch golfer or the 5 handicap, we're using it a lot more than them. And I wonder whether that's right or not. We haven't done enough analysis to answer that, but I feel like even our strategic choices, like kind of what you said, like when should you go for it in 2 or not, aren't optimized, which might be those bad decisions might be causing us to, whether it's cognitive bias or just not thinking through what you're doing, or probably like I guess there isn't enough data to actually educate. So it's a lack of education and research in terms of that decision making, where I think that's probably not optimized.
Yeah. And Sal, I've seen Arccos and you guys put out a lot of info, share some really good data pertaining to distance off the tee. And that's a big talk with the rollback and equipment and all of this kind of stuff. And, you know, I've had some interesting discussions with people thus far in these lockdown learning sessions. And Michael Breed said, this is the fact that we're talking about rollback. We should look at that as a positive from the golf community, because we've done such a good job in optimizing equipment, in optimizing fitness, in optimizing fitting and ball flight and all of that stuff. He said, there's no way we want to work on something, get it good, and then take it away. Ian Baker Finch said, look at the value, the role that power plays in the game today, where you don't have players like Corey Pavin and Lee Trevino and those shorter hitters who are able to succeed. They're able to have that level of top tier success. And so 2 different takes. Firstly, what does your data say? And then secondly, what's your take as an everyday golf geek like us? Sure.
I think, our data says maybe Michael Breed is right for the PGA Tour players and maybe the absolute elite of the elite. But for the average golfer, we're actually, like, over the last 3 years, we're hitting shorter, maybe by a yard, not much shorter, but it's statistically significant because we have so many drives. It's literally, we're right within 0.07 yards in terms of the population average, 3 standard deviations. So we're quick
question. Why do you think we're a yard shorter?
Yeah, my guess is, I think I don't really have a good answer to that, but my guess is that, human beings aren't robots. And when you look at a lot of the testing that club manufacturers do, they do it on robots. And so the testing that isn't done is what happens if you change the shape of the driver. Maybe the aerodynamics are better, but how does a golfer visually and mentally react to that? And so that data isn't captured. In Arccos on-course data, that is captured, because whatever you're reacting, however you're doing, it's possibly having, maybe it's making it more aerodynamic, maybe it gives you less confidence. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, the testing isn't happening on humans, it's happening on robots. And so that could be one theory. And I know Ping is using a lot of on-course data, and so is Cobra, in terms of changing that. It could be I think Paul Wood's theory was that as our demographic is growing, maybe we'll bring in wider, but we've normalized that for handicap levels across year and things like that. So the skill level, we're keeping it consistent. So I don't really have a good answer. I think we'll have to look deeper, but it's certainly not, we're not hitting it farther. And my opinion about what's happening, I think I'm a history buff. So if you read C.B. Macdonald's Scotland's Gift, like he wrote a book about 100 years ago. He's one of the founders of the USGA, one of the first USAM. And he was talking about standardization at that point. Like there was a big USGA debate going on. He was against standardization at all. And this was 100 years ago. And he's like, listen, the heritage of golf is innovation. For 400 years, there were no restrictions. It was like whatever equipment, what you bring it, and you play it, and you just gotta shoot the lower score, like leave everything open. And I understand like some of the restrictions that were introduced and all that stuff, but I think my point of view is the USGA needs to look at the 99.9999999% of golfers out there that do not. I mean, golf's not easy for us. We're not hitting it long. We're not like saying these courses are obsolete for us. So they need to consider that. And then there are other things, like when you look at the tournaments on TV, their balls bouncing like crazy. They roll the fairways, and the rough's so much shorter. So the penalty changes out of like the strokes you lose. The taller the rough gets in the U.S. Open, you can see it. The harder it is the greater the penalty of hitting out of the rough. So there are other ways to control the decision making and all that stuff for golfers. Right now, you've like made the ball run out so much and made the rough so little and smaller, so it's less of a penalty. So you're like bomb and gouge becomes like a preferred strategy. So I think there are other ways to adjust that while keeping I think the beauty of golf is I can play literally the same course that the U.S. Open was played on with the same equipment and compare myself. Okay, I shot 20 shots worse than that person, but I know exactly how many shots I shot worse, and there aren't those other things. Oh, it was with this other ball, or it was with these other clubs that weren't allowed. So I think that history of the game, I feel like, should be preserved. I don't think they should reduce. I don't think they should do anything from rolling stuff back. I think they should look at course conditions and things like that to really think about how to handle it that way.
That's interesting, because you said you came at it from a history perspective, and you said the history of the game should be preserved. And I know a lot of people who would use that exact statement for the opposite argument. The history of the game should be preserved. Because the players are simply hitting it so much further today than they were, and that's equipment, that's training, that's fitting.
Yeah, are you going to stop them from working out?
It's definitely from that better working out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like USGA can't control that. I mean, I think in the end, like the farther you hit, it's all about. It comes down to strokes gained actually. Like how many strokes are you losing if you hit the rough? And by and large, they're not losing enough strokes when they hit the rough. And so they're going to hit drivers a lot more often and bomb and gouge it more. I think that equation can change. I totally get your point about, like, okay, preserving the historic courses, are they going to be obsolete or not? Yeah. And I would say, is St. Andrews obsolete? Wind is its defense. There's certain courses like Warner-Moisset, hosted like a PGA championship back in the day. It's like 6,000 some yards, but not every course has to be a championship level course. It is what it is. You take that course for what it is. Similarly, I mean, so I think you need like 30 or 40 courses that are going to test these players, but I think course conditioning is going to have a big impact. But nobody's saying golf is easy. I think
no.
So I think like USGA needs to take into account the average golfer out there. That's my main point.
Yeah, my take would be just in 1 minute, Sal. My take would be I'm in favor of, and some people will get on me for this. I'm in favor of bifurcation. We see it. It happens in a lot of different sports. I think once you go to the pro level, you play with this type of golf ball, you play with this type of driver, this face flex, whatever size driver. You change the equipment for the professionals. And that would serve to do two things, in my opinion. It would bring 20 or 30 golf courses that are essentially obsolete. It would bring them back into play for tour events and major championships for those level players. Additionally, it would take the premium off of distance and make it shot making and shot, back in the day, if someone was a great putter, they could do really well on the PGA Tour. Back in the day, if someone was great with a wedge in their hand, they could do really well on the PGA Tour. Nowadays, you have to be a long driver in order to do, and there's players who are not long, but you have to pretty much be a long driver in order to have a chance to do well. That's just my take. Of thousands of people.
I agree with what you're saying in terms of you have to be a long driver today. I think they can maybe neutralize that in other ways other than rolling back the equipment through course conditions and things like that. But I think we'll agree to disagree on just the rollback. But I respect your opinion, and I can see both sides. I just worry about what impact. Like it's like a tough line to draw. Where do you, like, if you're somebody's playing the USM, does that count? It's only professional tournaments. Then how does that work in terms of junior golf, college golf, competitive golf, which courses, whatnot? I just find that a little confusing.
I hear you. I think it's easy. It's like, hey, use a metal bat until you turn pro, then you can use a wood one. It's if someone's really good, they'll adapt. They'll figure it out pretty quickly. And I know it can seem murky, but I really believe that for the everyday golfer, the type of people we're talking about, we cannot in any way, shape, or form roll it back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We don't need to make it harder.
We agree to that. Yep.
Yes. Sal, what else you got for me? What else you got? Come on, we got about 10 minutes to go here.
What else? Okay. Let's see. Well, I can ask you questions. Actually,
I've got one statement, and this was a big eye opener for me, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Paul Wood shared this nugget with me that was extracted from Arccos data, and it's something that I've really worked towards incorporating into my teaching and into my golf schools, is when players hit shots inside 80 yards, when they're 80 yards and closer to the flag, we've got fairway, we've got rough, and we've got sand. Three places they can possibly play from. Well, I'm sure there's others, but three primary places. They're playing 2/3 of their shots out of rough. And how often do I, as a coach, have my students hit shots out of rough? How often do I, as a golfer, practice out of rough? I think that's so important. Just that little nugget was really eye-opening to me.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a great point. In fact, I think like the other thing similar to that, I think shared with us was looking at Arccos data. They saw the average chip was from 40 yards. So they were never fitting anybody when you went through a fitting on a 40-yard chip. And they realized, that's the most frequent chip and distance. So we got to optimize everything around that. And that was eye-opening too. So that was fascinating. I think, what should I talk? Well, so by the way, I mean, I was just looking at it because we're rolling out like a new strokes gain feature, which is going to let you break your game down in 18 different, actually maybe like 23 different views. Things like,
tell me about it. So.
Yeah, so you'll be able to look at, how do you hit how good are you in your approach shots from different terrains, rough, tee box, fairway, and sand. And I learned that I lose I'm about a 1, well, with the new handicap, I'm like a 1. Previously I was a 2.
Okay.
And I want to get down to like a 0. And I'm losing a shot and a half around on my par 3 approach shots, which I hit 4 of them, and from the tee box versus I'm actually gaining strokes from the fairway. And so I was like, huh, that's really weird. And
See that ball
so,
up lower.
yeah, so exactly. So what I did was I played the last 4 rounds. I've had 4 of my best rounds, which was last one was a month ago, unfortunately. But I started my best rounds, which was last one was a month ago, unfortunately. But I stopped teeing the ball up on par threes. I was like, I'll just treat it like a fairway, and I'm hitting it so much better. And I realized, I never practice teeing up a ball and hitting my approach shot. I literally never do. And the only time I do it is on a par 3 hole. And that was something I'd never thought of. But maybe I'll talk about, well, 3 putting and 1 putting. And it's like fascinating, like by handicap, 1 putting drops dramatically. You can just see it. Like average scratch golfer has 5.21 putts in a round. They have 11.72 putts and 1.13 putt every round. That's the average.
Okay.
And where 1 putt and 3 putt start becoming equal, where people have about the same 1 putt and 3 putts, is at the 16 handicap. They have an average of 3.31 putts around and 3.33 putts around. And after that, 3 putts over. So it's like the 16 handicap somehow is all like there's all these other patterns we find where the 16 handicap something switches. But maybe one other thing I'll share is your club distances. Like, as you're thinking about your carry or whatever for a 7-iron 168 or 158, whatever it might be. It's not the same out of the rough versus the fairway. In fact, when we look at our data, we see like there's an inflection that happens. So you lose distance. So like a 4-iron, 5-iron, 6-iron, sometimes a 7-iron, go shorter. You're losing about 10%, anywhere between 8 to 15% of your distance out of the rough. But then after a certain club, and I think it certainly depends golfer to golfer. We haven't found like a pattern there. It might be we haven't really correlated skill yet, but then your approach shots start going a little bit longer. Like whether it's an 8-iron or 9-iron, they out of the rough, they start going longer. And it's probably, my guess is on the first piece where they're going shorter, you're catching a lot more grass because those clubs are such. And then with the 8-iron, 9-iron, they're higher lofted, you're getting less spin out of it. So maybe it's going a little bit farther. But I thought that was really interesting.
That's very interesting too. Yeah. It ties into a little bit. I was talking to Eric Henriksen from Ping. When you get water on the ground, you get water trapped between the face and the golf ball. And with a 4-iron, a 5-iron, that'll actually cause the ball to spin more and it'll go shorter. Well, with an 8 and a 9-iron, it'll cause the ball to spin less and the ball will go longer.
Yeah, and I'm talking like I think I see people asking questions. I'm talking this is like over on average. So this is over a large data set. What are the patterns we're seeing? Not on any specific shot, and certainly on specific shots it'll be different based on the lie. But by and large, on average, what happens? Fascinating.
Yeah, and so it's not in this type of grass with these conditions. It's on average this happens, and that's certainly what all this information is. Sal, I know a couple of people have asked about. Can you tell us about the link? The Arccos link. What's the timeline? What's happening there?
Yeah, so we're working hard on it. We haven't really. I'll get beat up sharing this, but basically, the issue which we had communicated to a user base we'd run into was we didn't like the GPS quality that we were getting. We solved that problem. We were in the process of building out prototypes. We actually were in China doing that when coronavirus hit. So we switched manufacturing to the US we made the decision as a company that we want to get this out rather than wait out the coronavirus stuff happening in China, because factories were shut down there for like a month or a couple of months, depending upon the factory. And so we picked a partner here in the US, which was going to be a lot more expensive for us to do, but we decided as a company that that's the right path. Unfortunately, now coronavirus has hit here, so we're monitoring that situation. So far, our factory hasn't shut down. I would say we're in the we've produced about 100 units that are going through testing right now to make sure the production process is correct. And then we're going to continue monitoring the coronavirus situation. And obviously, we're going to do what's right for the employees before anybody else.
Certainly, yeah.
And we got to take care of everybody's health. And as soon as we have an update on that, you guys will be the first to know. Like I know how badly people want it, and I know how badly we want to make and get it out.
Yeah.
We've solved all the technical challenges. Now the challenge is navigating the coronavirus stuff while doing production. And we're going to do our best to get it out this golf season, whenever that starts, hopefully.
Cool.
So,
Yeah.
remember, it's
I like that
top
word.
of mind for us, top priority for us. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
So we're not giving up. We're not stopping. I want people to know, like, that is the number one priority for our hardware team.
Okay. And just so people know, if you're not sure as to what the link might be, the link is when you use Arccos, you've got to keep your cell phone in your front left pocket.
Yeah. You have to keep it in your front pocket. If it's an Android phone, they generally have not as high quality a microphone as the iPhone. So we recommend front left, but with iPhone and stuff, you can. I actually keep it in my front right. But you have to keep it in your front pocket. And I'll say this: a lot of people think it's like they don't want to carry their phone in their pocket, and it's true. Like a lot of people don't. But like
I know this, Sal. A lot of girls don't.
Yeah, they don't. They
in particular, ladies don't want to, you know.
But their attire isn't like the golf attire that's been made for them so far doesn't allow that. But I'll like John K, for example. That was one of the hangups he had. As John K. Solheim, the president of Ping, when I got to know him, he's like, I'm not going to play with Arccos because I don't want to carry my phone in my pocket. And I was like, just try it once. And if you don't like it, you can return the product to us. And if the value isn't there, and by the way, the value is there not just on the data you're collecting. One of the things I didn't mention was as you're playing, we have an AI rangefinder. So it's taking weather, elevation, temperature. When it's cold, when it's 50 degrees, the ball's going to go less far. So we have built, like, using our data, we know what impact these conditions have, what angle the wind's coming in. And we're able to give you plays like distances. So it's like the Arccos number. And sometimes it can be different by like 30, 40 yards. And so we're delivering value while you're playing. We're delivering, and you can decide if it's such a pain. And like what happens is it's harder for us to convince people to try playing with the phone in the pocket. Once they try it, by and large, people stick with it because of the value. But I do understand people want it. We're working on it, and we'll get it out to you guys.
And I must say, as someone who's, I wasn't super excited about putting my phone in my pocket, but it goes in my pocket and it stays there for the whole round, and it's not a problem at all.
You forget about it. Like Apple and Google have spent billions of dollars training you to carry your phone in your pocket every single day. So you do forget about it.
Yes. Sal, very cool information. Anything you want to parting shots? You want to say anything here?
I mean, I'm just waiting for golf season to come back. Hopefully like the ability to go out golfing, whether it's in America or the rest of the world. We're seeing like serious drops in utilization. We are like one of the things we have is an internal platform where every time somebody takes a shot, there's like a blip that goes on the map of the world. And so we track that in the office. And right now there are lesser and lesser blips. And hopefully as we overcome coronavirus, we'll start seeing more and more of those blips so we can all get out there and golf. And in the meantime, we might have something. We're trying to work internally to create maybe like a challenge, data-driven challenge for golfers who are stuck at home. So maybe we'll have something to share about that in a week, and hopefully your listeners and users or viewers will like it.
That'll be great. I look forward to that day as much as you do, Sal. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing some of your data, some of your expertise. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to post. I'm going to record this episode, Sal. I'll put it on my YouTube channel, and when it's on my YouTube channel, I'm going to post the link into Arccos and where people can read up more about it. If you're skeptical, that's okay. Go and read up on it. I'm telling you, if you read enough, if you research enough on it, you're going to dive into the product. You're going to love it. It's going to start to save you strokes. So I will put a link under my YouTube video on this. I'll even put a link on my Instagram where people can go and check it out.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for being there.
Sal, thanks so much for your time, and please stay safe. Hey.
All right, you too. Take care.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.